Good morning, everyone. It's Lee Henson, President and Founder of Agile Dad, and it's time for today's episode of the Daily Stand-Up. So without any further ado, let's get started. It's Tuesday. We're off to a good start. It's a beautiful week. Everything has been wonderful. I know a lot of you have been working hard. I sure know I have. I've been teaching a lot of classes lately. And one of the common themes that I've seen come up a few times here in the last couple of classes is teams are still struggling with items that have been placed into a sprint carrying over into subsequent sprints. So it's one of these things that's such a simple thing to talk about, but having items carry over from one sprint to the next shouldn't be common practice. It shouldn't be something that's happening all the time. So that begs the question, how can we prevent things from floating from one to the other? And, I thought, wow, what a great topic. What a great question. So I thought we would cover the top 10 reasons why I see this happening. And, it's interesting because I think all of these reasons, or each of these reasons, could individually contribute. But the good news is, I don't think this is something that has to be a certain way. I think it's something that we can certainly review and try to overcome. And I think once we get started into this, you'll easily see that there's a pattern and that there's things you can change. So for starters, I think coming in right at the top, the team needs to have the ability to learn from what happened in a previous sprint's outcome. So if the previous sprint's outcome states that they didn't meet their sprint goals, we need to figure out why they didn't meet their sprint goals and address the issues. Once again, sounds like Captain Common Sense to me. But what I often see is a blame game where they say, well, it wasn't our fault. It was this other team's fault. If they had only done this, or we didn't have this one piece we needed. And I think it's just important for us to recognize right up front that we can't play the blame game, that we need to be in tune, intact, and really be part of the inspect and adapt model in order for it to work. Second, I think, is when the team doesn't exactly know who the real product owner is. I know that sounds crazy, but when the team is collecting information or gathering information from multiple people for the things they have to do and consume in their backlog, sometimes this is created as a result of the product owner not making decisions frequently or fast enough. The product owner not clarifying things fast enough to the team. So the team's going to wind up going off in their own direction. And a proxy, quote unquote, product owner will step in and say, let's just press forward this way, or let's just do this. And what winds up happening as a result is the team loses a lot of time and they lose a lot of groundwork and end up waiting for information and pulling different stories in to work on. And obviously, that makes things carry over. Interesting. Some things you just never thought about, right? So what about inter-team dependencies? I've had lots of opportunities working in multi-scrum team setups, and dealing with dependencies in a single team is challenging. But when you got multiple teams, if you're not following more of a scrum of scrums model, or you're not having advanced product ownership refinement sessions where product owners get together and have discussions, if the UI folks are left out, or UX, if the back-end database folks are left out, a lot of times what you'll wind up seeing is that you're creating these intergroup or inter-team dependencies. And while every team should strive to be cross-functional, there's still truth in the fact that some organizations are still operating with these people loosely tied to the teams. And in many cases, it's because of the size of the organization or the fact that they're in growth mode, where they don't necessarily have an architect or a marketing person to put on each team. So they're artificially creating dependencies, which is forcing things to carry over from one to another. How about this one? The sprint backlog is not updated regularly. For whatever reason, teams just hate to update the sprint backlog. They always turn to the Kanban board because, well, it's only 3 columns. I can slide something from one column to another. But for whatever reason, teams stray away from updating time, if they're keeping track of time, or updating status in a sprint backlog. Now, I'm never, ever, ever an advocate for keeping track of time. I feel like it's a waste of time. But I do feel like if it's part of a team working agreement, that they understand that updating the sprint backlog is important, because this is the, if you picture yourself in an aquarium, this is the view that everyone else can see from the outside. So this is the impression that you give off, and you only have one chance to make a first impression. And I think that sometimes people don't consider perception. They don't consider how other people see things. And I think it's just important for us to understand that if we're going to be successful and not carry things over, we need to frequently update the backlog, specifically the sprint backlog, so that we know exactly where we need to go. And that leads me to the one that I almost broke into here. Not refining the product backlog before sprint planning. Fact. If you're not refining the sprint backlog, doing your backlog grooming, getting everything ready to go, and having an N+1, N+2 sprint work defined a little bit in advance or refined a little bit in advance, then you're going to run into this issue over and over and over again. There are many large organizations. In fact, one of the organizations that I'm working with now is really struggling to get to N+2. And that's okay, right? Everybody struggles. Everybody hurts sometimes. But it's one of these things where we need to make sure that we help them understand that refining the backlog is going to be the key to successfully getting to a point where the reduction of ambiguity is enough that the team doesn't feel like they're obligated or have to carry things over from one sprint to another. Oftentimes, the truth is, another thing that makes things carry over is undone work. So if the team does not produce the potentially releasable increment at the end of each sprint, and they keep accumulating things that they didn't quite finish, or I call this one the almost done column, right? And there's so many things that enter the almost done column. We're waiting for UAT, we're waiting for performance testing, we're waiting for the security approval. There's so many things that hit this column, and I think that we don't take those things into account when we look at the work holistically. So I think it's important for us to look at the work holistically and take those things into account. Number 4, we didn't take our number 4. Now I'm going backwards here, counting down from 10 to 1. But the next one is a missing definition of done. Either the team doesn't have a definition of done at all, or the definition of done is too minimal. It takes away transparency, and it causes the team to feel like they don't know what done means. So they just keep working towards that almost done column and never getting anything accomplished. Another thing I've noticed is teams fail to work together, so no teamwork or lack of teamwork. Everybody's picking up a story based on their individual skills and ability, and they're not allowing for people to work together to swarm to get things done. This is the whole I-shaped versus T-shaped team things. If you find that you're continually working in I-shaped teams, you're going to get things done more quickly if they're specified, but the unspecified work will take longer. And in addition, it's going to cause you to have teams that are not cross-pollinated. So you're losing cross-collaboration. You're honing in on silos. So you're not going to have anything but a siloed organization. And it's going to cause you to not be able to complete the work in the way that you would. In essence, this is going to make things carry over. These are all just reasonable things that make sense. Next is, how do you handle unplanned work? So let me explain. I think one of the things that I've noticed as another trend, and maybe even a topic for another podcast this week, another episode, is that people don't know how to handle interruptions. They don't know how to handle something that wasn't planned. The truth is, most organizations are in a position where they try to plan for all the unexpected, but the truth is the unexpected still happens. So I think that a lot of organizations or teams are being advised to not plan to your full capacity and set aside a percentage of your time to. And the truth is, nobody operates that way, right? Once you start working on something, you finish working on something. And I think that sometimes the unplanned work creeps in because it's more important we get it done, and work that was in the sprint gets carried over. It's that simple. So we need a mechanism or a method in place where we're not just allocating time, but we're saying, I'm going to dedicate a person each sprint that will rotate off to take care of some of these unplanned things and to protect the core team from the temptation or the urge to shift away from what they're doing to go do something else. They shouldn't even be aware that there was an interruption. And I think that this responsibility lies on the Scrum Master and on the ability of leadership to focus and ask themselves, even a high-performing team of 6 with frequent interruptions is less productive than a team of 5 with no interruptions. Think about that for a minute. And of course, my last one is that the team is still forecasting or predicting using time. If you take time out of the equation and you take individual capacity out of the equation and you strictly look at this from a team-based velocity perspective, it makes it a lot easier for you to be accurate with your forecasting, and it makes it a lot easier for you to choose the right number of items to pull into a sprint. Now, I've been bombarded with questions about, can't we use it as a check and balance, and can't we say that a point equals so much time? And I highly discourage that. I think that the second you tie time to effort, the second you tie time to work, what's going to happen is people are going to start thinking individually, like we said before. Product owners' interpretation of time and developers' interpretation of time are totally different. I should call it producers' interpretation of time. It's completely different. So it doesn't matter whether you're building hardware, software, products, or services. It always is the same thing. So we want to make sure. So going through your list again, I'll start here at the top and I'll go back down so we can make sure we got them all. 1, you need to take time out of the equation. If you take time out of the equation and stop thinking in terms of time, things aren't going to carry over. 2, you need to know how to handle unplanned work. You need to make sure you understand how you're going to handle interruptions, and you need to set aside time and make sure that you, or not necessarily time, but an individual who can take over and prevent the interruption, because we know that setting aside just an allocated amount of time doesn't work. 3, we need to avoid I-shaped teams and get to T-shaped teams that people can pick up work and get it done, as opposed to focusing on individuals and letting individuals focus on individual events. I think that's incredibly important. 4 is we don't have a definition of done, or our definition of done is weak. 5 is everything reaches that almost done state. I like that one. We're nearly done. It's not done. And we need to make sure we understand what we need to do in order to get things done. 6 is not having proper backlog grooming or refinement sessions before sprint planning, meaning that the work is not properly prepared. 7 is not updating your sprint backlog and causing disruption. 8 is having dependencies in the teams and across multiple teams and across the organization and not knowing how to deal with those. 9 is having some type of product owner that's not really a product owner trying to drive work that's not really work that the team should be doing, but they shouldn't be doing. That's that whole proxy thing. And then finally, 10 is, making sure that the team understands that they're responsible for taking part and inspect and adapt and understanding what they can do to improve and learning from things that they've done in the past. Long one today, but worth it. So I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Daily Stand Up, and I want to thank my friends over at, it looks like Agilemania, for sending this over to me. They wanted me to review this, and I think it's fantastic. So thanks for sending it over. And if you have a topic that you want to hear an episode of the Daily Stand Up on, do let me know. Send it over. We'd love to talk about your topics, the things that are most important to you, so that you can learn more and become more effective in your Agile community. As always, we encourage you to stay healthy, stay well, and stay agile, my friends. Until next time, do take care.